Hi, I'm Emma Flanders, and I'm one of the Imagine You Education and Engagement Directors.
And hi, I'm Hannah McGrath, and I'm the other Imagine You Education and Engagement Director.
And today we are going to have a conversation with José Cruz González, the playwright, and Ismael Lara Jr., the director of Tomás and the Library Lady.
Hi, I'm José Cruz González, playwright of Tomás and the Library Lady. So happy to be here.
Hello, my name is Ismael Lara Jr., and I am the director of Tomás and the Library Lady.
Okay, so our first question is for Jose. Basically, our question is, why did you choose this story and what drew you to this book specifically when creating an adaptation? And what came first? Did you want to write a play first and then you found the story, or you found the story and wanted to write the play?
Oftentimes, these ideas come either from the playwright or they come from other sources. In this case, Tomás and the Library Lady was a children's book written by Pat Mora. And Pat, had heard the story about Tomás Rivera and decided to write this book. So the way I was introduced to the book was through David Czar at Child's Play. He, at the time, was the artistic director. And the way that book came to him was through Tim Wadham, who was a librarian in Arizona. And he came to David and said, I think this might be a really cool adaptation. And so David said, I think I know the playwright. Let me reach out to him. And so I've had a relationship with Child's Play for a number of years. And so David sent me the book and I read it. And I said, it's a really cool book, a picture book. But I've already sort of written about that world because I grew up in that world and I know that world pretty well. And he said, well, keep thinking about it. And I said, okay, well, let me do this. I said, I went then to the University of California, Riverside in Southern California that has Tomás Rivera's archive there at the library. In fact, it's named after him, that library. And the librarians there and the archivists were really helpful in opening up his personal materials, his written materials. And of course, I read everything I could read about him in terms of his creative work and began to see some sort of themes and threads that were emerging out of there. And I went back to David and I said, David, I'd like to do this.
What is the inspiration for this story?
Now, so the inspiration was there because I was able now to retap on another side of Tomás as the writer, because the book focuses on a boy learning to read, wanting to read, hungry, curious, until he finds this library lady that opens that door to him. And so the other part of the learning about this Tomás and that story was I was able to interview his wife, Concha Rivera, as well as his one of his siblings. And so also that helped to sort of fill out the story in ways that weren't in the book, right? But could help to tell a bigger story in Tomás and the Library Lady. I didn't know anything about the Library Lady. So I wrote to the public library where she used to work. And the director of the public library, of course, knew her and wrote me this one letter. And it was beautiful because in the letter, she said that she always wore tennis shoes. She always had an umbrella during the summer, I guess, to keep herself from, getting too hot. And she was always shushing people in the library. And when people would ask her, Berta, how are you today? She'd say, Washington's dead, Lincoln too, and I'm not doing so well myself. And so just that one line that she gave me clued me into something about the library lady. And finally, I was able to find the photographs of Tomás from the library archive, but also the librarian sent me pictures of Berta as a young woman and as an elderly woman when she retired. And finally, the last thing, when Tomás was invited to Washington, D.C. By President Carter to receive an award, they asked him, who do you want to invite to this ceremony. And he said, there's this little old lady from Hampton, Iowa, that I'd like to include. Of course, she was gone by then, but what a wonderful memory that he had kept from his childhood, now as an important educator and an artist, that he would recall back and want her to be a part of that. I didn't have to go too far because, like Tomás, I was raised in that world of farm working. My parents were farm workers, my grandparents and my parents. And for my brothers and I, we grew up working alongside our parents as children. So we pretty much knew what that world was like. And so it wasn't too far for me to draw from that. But Tomás writes in his anthology and his stories certain things that sort of would rise up. And they became threads for me in the story of telling the story about this boy being curious and and wanting to get his hands.
And as soon as I started reading, I immediately felt a connection. One, because of the language. There was Spanish, sprinkled throughout the play. And one of my goals while here at Northwestern is to make certain that I'm bringing the stories of my people to the university as the only Latinx director in the MFA cohort. And so that was one of the big things. And then as I continued reading, I was like, oh, this is a migrant worker family. And my grandparents came from Mexico to the United States and worked in the fields. And they are the reason that I am sitting here in front of you today. Without them working with their hands and working in the fields, I would not be here, right? And as I continued to read, sort of engrossed in the play, I reached the final page. And there's this beautiful line that I don't want to butcher, so I'm going to read it. And it says, on behalf of the many Chicano parents who have aspired for generations that their children be educated, but who do not know what the education system is. And that line, completely grabbed my heart, because I am a first generation undergraduate college graduate, and I'm a first generation graduate student. And none of my family members have attended college, and that is no fault of theirs. That is, that is the system that we live in. That is the fear that we are sort of put into. And so, those were the major things that really drew me to this play. And when I finished it, I immediately, jumped up off of my couch and said, okay, well, I'm going to say yes to this play. And I'm so grateful that I did.
Along those lines, I'd love to know, how are you hoping that audiences, when they see it in just a few weeks, how do you hope that they will connect with it?
I mean, I would like audiences, specifically, I would like the Latinx audience to see themselves and their ancestors and people who have paved the way for us to realize our abilities. To the moment in your life when a teacher or a librarian or a mentor sort of opened your eyes to a new world. I think that is how our audience is going to connect to this play. And in the larger scheme of things, I think why it's important and why it's important now. No matter where you come from, no matter how fearful of the education system you are, no matter how far behind you feel, I think that this play is important because it shows us that with imagination and curiosity, and we can face our fears and really realize the power of being able to tell our own story. Yeah.
I think the most important thing is that it has to be really truthful, what you're trying to tell. And from a child's point of view, I have to tell you that having worked with children on new plays over the years, they're the best dramaturgs. They're the best because they're honest. And they'll tell you when the truth meter is not working. They'll just be honest. Adults will just sort of maybe just say, oh, that was nice, and that's the end of it. But children will call you on it. And so you have to be honest. That's my, that's the sort of way I see how, we as storytellers need to be, present and open.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we underestimate children a lot. I think that, there are sometimes moments whenever we think that theater for young audiences has less weight or gravity than theater for adults. And really, I think that that is a false perception. I think that they are of the same weight.
To me, Tomás and the Library Lady is still relevant to this day, even though this was written and performed in 2006. And since then, it's been around the country on tours, as well as schools and universities that have done it, reaching over 500,000 people. And I think it still holds its truth and applies to what communities are having to deal with, whether they are farm working communities or essential workers. It's families, trying to get get along, raise their families, being part of the American dream. And, I think that to me resonates in deep ways, I think. And also, it's a way for sort of sometimes the more complex questions that we deal with as adults. Children are also having to deal with those kinds of things, and it's manifested in the classroom or in the playground. And so by creating stories and telling stories, they can now, see a character that may be like them or going through things like them, and sort of maybe help them kind of come to understand how maybe that character deals with something, and I hope in a good way that they can come out hopeful and feeling like they're not the only person in the world that is alone, and to see Tomás in a classroom where he's feeling picked on, because his English isn't that good, but here's this other side that is being fostered and developed, and we all want people to be able to see who we are inside, recognize that, and help us to grow from that. And I think that's what's beautiful about, I think, the Library Lady is, she was of German background, and she, this was at the time when this story happened. When this actually happened was during World War II, when we were in a great world war in Europe, as well as in the Pacific. And so you could probably imagine what that must have been like with sort of the social setting of that time. And sometimes also feeling like you're an outsider. And here are these two outsiders, and in some way tapping into one another and, teaching each other something about themselves and their interests. But the common bond is, of course, the love of reading, the love of stories. And so I think, sometimes, you hope that the plays that you write are going to last, and sometimes they don't last. They're just like a chocolate candy bar or something. They're gone, and that's it. But I think Tomás continues to do the good work, I think, out there in the communities, but also entertain and teach for somebody who may not be of the community, of that community, to go, I never thought of that. I never saw that, but I'm now walking through in shoes of somebody else that I've never experienced. And for the child who maybe comes from that world to go, I didn't even know I existed.
I think we have time for one more question, and I wanted to circle back a little bit. We obviously touched on this throughout on, creating these stories and then bringing Tomás's story to life. And I think, it's not random that so many popular TYA shows are based on books for kids. And I think maybe our audience members at home would love for you to talk a little bit, Jose, about how does that process of adaptation go, and how do you go from translating narrative into dialogue and really making those characters come to life in play format?
When adapting a book, there's already some wonderful things about doing an adaptation of a book. First of all, you don't have to create a story. There's a story already there. Also, you don't have to create characters because characters are already there. Now it's about thinking, how do I take, say, things that are in third person to first person? Oftentimes you might have dialogue in a book that can be useful, but there will be other moments where you have to fill things in. And also, you don't really describe things in a play, you have to show them. And so, now you have to see characters going after something, wanting something, and then what's in their way to getting something, what their goal is. And so there's already a structure there. I think when we looked at Tomás, I wanted to try to tell a story with only 2 actors in the original version. Now it's changed. There's ways the play can now be done with 4 actors as opposed to 2 or more, depending on the situation of the team producing. And I wanted to use multimedia. So those were some things that I wanted to look at. But the idea of also looking for the theatricality of storytelling by using 2 actors and multimedia, how could we use those actors throughout all these, roles and quick changes, coming in and out and switching characters. Also using animation. I had the pleasure to play the grandfather in the piece. In fact, my voice was touring the entire time in the original production of Tomás and the Library Lady. I was just this big mustache that kind of you see here now. I was not so big. And so there's a lot of wonderful things. Where it deviated from Pat's book, and Pat and I talked about this, was she says, it's a book about reading. I said, yeah. I said, but what I wanted to add was that Tomás also became a writer. He became one of our first Latinx really important writers with his book, his books, his writings that would become literature that I would study in college, many years later. So I say that those are some of the things that we look at adaptation.
It's been a challenge thus far, and we're sort of like, okay, take it as it goes. And be patient with the process. It's almost an experiment, kind of having that mindset. But we are on stage starting on Saturday, 2 people by 2 people filming different parts. And I'm really excited. I mean, we're also using multimedia because we're having some animations that are being drawn on the final filmed version of it. So I think it's going to be a really exciting visual experience.